Hey, Ariana. We'll get started in just a minute. Is that your transaction coordinator, Ariana? Mine is over here sleeping. Let's see. I know. Yeah, here's part of it. Hey, Ricky. Yeah. Ricky, you're the Op City queen. You'll have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Am I?
Yeah, you're taking a lot of those things. I don't know how many of them are going to pan out, but you gotta play to win, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Good deal. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see my presentation. I think you guys will be glad you tuned in today. We're going to do something real estate related, and then something kind of sort of real estate related. So it occurred to me that, we are obviously still in the throes of the pandemic, and regardless of, health levels, I think there's still a challenge with just understanding how to get business out there during the pandemic, whether it's the people that you're trying to prospect for that don't feel comfortable, or you yourself don't feel comfortable. It certainly is good to continue to discuss these things. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about, again, just how to further prospect during the pandemic. We're going to talk about some short-term solutions, some long-term solutions, and some keys to success. And then the kind of real estate related thing we're going to talk about a little bit later is mortgage fraud. So I'm sure that those of you that just got out of school, they touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper for reasons that will be obvious later. So how has prospecting changed in general during the pandemic? Well, there's just inherently a lack of listings in general. So that just means a lack of open houses, which means less opportunity. I think that it's to a point where those that are having open houses aren't nearly as nervous about some of the requirements that existed a year ago, but just because the numbers, there's just not as many open houses out there. Interest rates are burning a hole in the pockets of buyers. Might not be for long, though, as I heard that as early as March, the Federal Reserve is likely to increase lending rates, not our lending rates, but the rate at which they lend money to banks. And so that indirectly does impact the mortgage industry, especially if you have an adjustable rate mortgage. So just FYI. But that being said, there's still historically low rates, and people that couldn't get into a home 10 years ago certainly are finding it a lot easier today, and therefore have a high level of urgency. Got a lot of multiple offers going on. And it's almost impossible to do any in-person prospecting. So think about open houses, visiting expired listings, anything that you have to do in person. All right. So even hosting and sponsoring events, I can't tell you how many things get scheduled only to get canceled. So that is still very common. And so it's just very difficult to get in front of motivated buyers and sellers. And you certainly can't do food deliveries or pop buys. You know, I mean, those were a mainstay of real estate, and I think that those have all but dried up. So what can we do short term to try and get in front of the motivated? So let me just talk about Remine a little bit. So unfortunately, the MLSs that we're in, everyone has access to Remine except for San Antonio. So Ricky, I apologize. You guys don't have access to this, but hopefully it won't be too much longer. But you know, Remine is the application within your suite of products where it really replaces traditional postcard farming. So think about the neighborhood that you live in. If you wanted to send 1,000 postcards out to people in hopes of getting business, well, the challenge is you don't know who just moved in, who's truly motivated, and so on. So Remine is that application that reveals for you who has been searching on websites that are real estate related. And so it really does create an opportunity to focus in on people that might be wanting to list their home. So think about it as the electronic version of farming. And then there is Zoom, and you don't necessarily have to pay for Zoom if you keep your meetings to less than 45 minutes. But if you wanted to buy a subscription to Zoom, it is not that expensive as compared to the return that you'll get from that investment. And so when you think about not being able to meet people in person, people are now even more so accustomed to doing things over a teleconference platform like Zoom. And so think about holding a seminar for first-time home buyers, right? Or a military niche, or talking about affordable housing or senior housing. Maybe you're targeting millennials or people that are bilingual, anything like that that you're used to doing in person, you can certainly do on Zoom. Now, if you want some tips on how to market that, you know, let's set up some time and talk about that, because you know, you don't want people to not show up either. But I think it's a lot less effort to tune in to a Zoom meeting than it is to, you know, get dressed, put on your coat, and go out somewhere to attend a meeting, even if there wasn't a pandemic. I think your attendance rates are going to be higher online. And then lenders or really small builder relationships. And so I just did this for an agent this week. And there is a National Association of Home Builders and a Texas Association of Home Builders. And let me just go to the Texas one. And on each of these websites, and I'm just going to the state one because it's more relevant, but they all have a membership directory. So if you go to membership and you go to membership directory, you can search by builder, remodeler, member directory. Okay, so when you click here, they're all sorted by alphabetically, but I am not suggesting going after American Legend or DR Horton or Meritage or any of the big builders. What I am suggesting is looking at some of these names, and you can search by zip code, or you can see near me, and look for names that you inherently just have no idea who they are, but they're obvious, they're builders. chances are they are independent builders that are only building a certain amount of homes per year. And that's becoming increasingly difficult for these guys because of the material shortage and all of that. So they are in need of our services. And so these are not necessarily groups of people that you have to be in front of all the time. And so you can always reach out via email, a phone call. You can certainly go in person if you feel comfortable, if they're even doing that. But I just want to kind of point you in the direction of where there seems to be an endless amount of people to call in the builder community. One of them is going to need your help to list their homes. Okay. And so if nothing else, introduce yourself as a resource, someone that knows the area, and that will surely gain some traction. Okay. So reach outside of the brokerage for any open houses, even if it means driving away. So if you search for open houses in the MLS, that's the best way. And although there's a shortage of these, they are still out there. And my recommendation is to always look for listings near you that are listed from a brokerage that isn't near you, because the likelihood of that agent wanting to come and do an open house that's 10, 15, 20 miles away is unlikely. So that will always, that always has potential in my mind. Leave your business card everywhere, right? So whether it's a dry cleaner or you're going to pick up a prescription, anybody is fair game. Okay, so in those rare instances you are out, do that. If you're still writing checks for to pay your bills, put a business card inside the envelope. That works too. Join social media groups where you can answer questions. I'm going to go into this a little bit later. But it's pretty self-explanatory. So whether you're on Facebook or any other, LinkedIn is a great one too. All of them have groups where you can kind of insert yourself in answering different questions amongst the membership. And so in the spirit of that, start, if you can't find one to join, start your own. Maybe you start an Ask a Realtor session or a group. You could do a promotional video and post it on Facebook and say, hey, between the hours of 10 and 2 this Saturday, I am going to be available. I'm going to be live and you can ask me anything you want. And so that kind of replaces maybe having a booth at an art show or having to be someplace where people have to come to you. Okay, so I've seen that work well. Sorry, you could capitalize on local leases. So everyone's looking for a lease as well. I mean, people that can't buy are looking to lease. What I've seen work well is whether they believe they can afford a home or not, there is still a market for leases. And not a lot of realtors want to work with renters. Not a lot of renters can find a professional realtor to work with. So if you want to have something to still generate income and get you out there and stay engaged, that is a good way as well. That's a good source of short-term business. All right. So I would still suggest visiting expired listings and for sale by owners, but if you don't want to knock on the door and you're kind of apprehensive about the COVID thing, you can always just leave a packet to review and maybe a sticky note on the top of the envelope that says, hey, call me to discuss. And I just got to think that for sale by owners have to be absolutely overwhelmed by the process of this, showing homes, taking the calls to show homes, trying to find a qualified buyer, all that has just got to be a beat down. Because I think a lot of these folks enter into a for sale by owner relationship thinking that they're going to save on commission and they're going to just list the home for whatever price they want and they're going to get it without any kind of effort. And so some of these folks just have to be discouraged. All right. So long-term solutions for people that already know, like, and trust you. So work by referral is kind of the holy grail of for a realtor. When you work by referral, you no longer outwardly prospect. You just kind of wait for the phone to call from people that either already know you or are being referred to you. And so when you think about when someone refers you to somebody, the only reason people refer others in any profession is so that they can look good and feel good. I mean, they want to be the one that says, oh yeah, I know a person, I know a guy, I know a gal. And so it is their reputation that is on the line. And so they also want to know how that referral went so that they can refer you again. So there are lots of coaching companies that will just teach you how to work by referral. I've purchased one of the more popular ones from Brian Buffini. It's on our website under business building. And so there's really not a whole lot to it other than to just stay consistent with reaching out to people. So that's always a tried and true. That's longer term though. We do have a follow-up program also on our website under business building, and that will tell you what to send to who and when to send it and kind of what the overall goal is there. All right. And so I also mentioned here that you've just got to get a database. You've got to wrap your arms around the set of people that are in your camp, right, in your corner, that are going to refer folks to you. All right, and then exploit the heck out of your database and systematically stay in touch. Use the Prospect Plus template as a guide. So the Prospect Plus is under marketing. That's the 2022 marketing plan that just kind of tells you what to send to who on a marketing, from a marketing perspective. Our follow-up plan goes a step further, but just wanted to let you know that was there as well. All right, be your neighborhood expert. Choose 25 to 50 of your neighbors and do a mail campaign. And I'm not suggesting things like just sold, just listed postcards. I'm suggesting, and I mentioned keep it small, 25 to 50 people, because everyone wants to know what their home's worth as told to them by a real estate professional. And the best way to do that is obviously through a CMA, but using an RPR report that's specific to their home. So whenever you go into RPR, you can look up any address in the country and it will tell you what the value is, and they'll give you a range and we'll give you a suggested price if you were to list it today. So that can be pretty powerful. And if nothing else, it promotes you as a neighborhood expert. I was on Nextdoor a day or so ago, which I'm never on, but I got some kind of random email that said, hey, there were updates, and maybe I just ignore them, but I took a moment to log in. And what strikes me is that nearly every post that I came across was someone wanting a referral for something. And they were things like painters, HVAC people, roofers. I mean, these are all people that we know intimately. And so when I suggested earlier to be a part of a Facebook group, that's only one outlet. I mean, you could arguably go on Nextdoor even once a week, once every 2 weeks. And I'm not sure if you can attach a file to your post. I want to say that you can. But if you're not local here in DFW, we have a vendor booklet that you can push out. But if you're not local, then surely you guys can comment on a referral for an HVAC person or a roofer. And I would always preface it by saying, hey, I am a local realtor in the area. I know a lot of people. Here's who I would, here is someone I would suggest for whatever it is they're looking for. And that has the possibility to turn into something for sure. So start or join a Facebook group, stay relevant. So Realtor did this recently and they actually got referrals from it. So not necessarily amongst your friend group, but start joining other Facebook groups and pages where you can comment as an expert on people's questions, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about our industry. Hey, choose 10 other realtors each week to reach out to for referrals who don't live near you. So we all live in big enough cities where wherever you live, there is another realtor that lives 25 miles across town, and they're likely not going to want to show a buyer a home where you are. And so I always recommend going onto the MLS. You can always search for agents in the MLS and find ones that don't live near you, and either send an email or a text and just say, I would love your referrals. I live in XYZ area. If you do that frequently enough, you will hit someone at the right place at the right time where they'll reach out to you. All right, adopt a senior, adopt a student, or just general outreach. So when the nursing home facilities and such, senior care facilities were locked down, this is kind of where that came from. But there is still a large degree of inconsistency regarding students getting back to school. Okay, one day they're back, the next day they're not. And so in the spirit of the old, big brother, big sister program, is there something locally like that that you can be involved in? Because remember, you're just one-on-one with either the senior or the student. You're not in large groups that might lead to something. I mean, if nothing else, it's great community service and it's great outreach, and there's clearly a need there. And I just find, I mean, if we believe that real estate is relationship based, I think this is a great idea. All right, and then lastly, I mean, if you're struggling for business, I mean, live up to the reputation that you think you have. I mean, do you think that you're responsive? Do you think that you're available? Do you think that you're professional? You're not just out there trying to drum up business for that sake. You want to make sure that you differentiate yourself from every other realtor out there. All right. And then lastly, other business partners. So again, landscapers, HVAC, roofers, people that are in and around other people's homes for a living. They all have websites. They all want referrals. Can you put your website link on theirs and vice versa? Okay. Now you got to be careful. If it's a lender or title company, you may be violating the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, right? Which is, you can't imply that you're getting something for giving a referral. So if you ever have any questions about that, let me know before you do it. But otherwise, it's a great example of just reciprocating that referral business. All right. So secrets to success. So, as you may find yourself with some downtime, technology is out there. If you're unfamiliar with sites like Remine or RPR or things that serve to make your life easier, you'd be amazed at what 2 hours of training will do. A lot of it comes directly from your board and it's free. And so even if it is a refresher on the MLS, you are going to learn something. Okay. So I would invest the time in that technology, and then create a system and stick to it. Dedicate 2 hours minimum every day to prospecting for new business. And set a weekly goal of touches or outreach and track it. Prepare for your day the day before. And at a minimum, have an email campaign and a one-page resume done. And so even if you don't have a database that sends out email campaigns automatically, on our marketing tab, I have artwork for things like, Happy New Year, Happy Birthday, Merry Christmas, Happy St. Patrick's Day. All those things are branded and they're in picture format. You can always set up a mail group of your database, and at the very least, attach those and send them out whenever it's appropriate, around those holidays or whenever you think it's appropriate. I have, I think, 30 of them in there, so you can obviously send one out every month. Okay. Right, and then we also have buyer and seller presentations made. They are on the tab that says buyer seller leases. They're towards the top. And so that you don't scramble to create something to leave behind for someone, I would have a couple of these pre-made. It also gets you thinking that your next piece of business might be right around the corner. All right. So I think it's important to hear from your peers within the office relative to what has worked for them under this topic. So an agent I spoke with this week has had great luck networking within their church and as part of just a general outreach and community service effort. And so what she says was, word is starting to get out that I'm a realtor and people are asking me tons of questions. And so this is not going to happen on the first try, but she is doing something to engage people and just be present in the moment and not hide the fact that she's a realtor and she can help people. And so I thought that was great. The next one is start and use a database. This came from the same person. And so she did not have a database previously. And in the spirit of new year, let's set some goals. And I know I need to have a database. She started one and she said, well, I started adding people to a database and suddenly I realized I had more names in there than I thought. And so it's like anything, one or two is not going to hit you like a ton of bricks, but after a month of doing this, you're going to have a large amount, larger than you probably thought, amount of people that you can point to that you can market to. So I thought that was interesting. And then, as we've mentioned before, joining a Facebook group, I've had a realtor do this that I've spoken to recently, and he's gotten 4 referrals from it. And he just said, I started getting actual referrals from just answering questions. And I mean, this gentleman is not high intensity. He's, just there to answer questions if people have them. And he just kind of commented where he could, and don't know the nature of the questions or the answers, but whatever they were, did lead to business. So I wanted to just kind of impart that to you as proof that a lot of this stuff does work. The secret, though, is commitment and time. I mean, none of this is going to happen immediately, but I do think those were good takeaways. So before I move on to mortgage fraud, does anybody have anything to comment or add, or are any of y'all doing something that seems to be working for you? No? Okay. If you do, and you think that it could benefit others, let me know, and I'll pass it along. So I wanted to move on to a subject that we don't probably never talk about. I certainly haven't done any training on it. But when you think, I mentioned RESPA earlier, so that stands for the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And a settlement company is either a realtor, a lender, or a title company. Okay. And you could throw insurance in there, I suppose, if you wanted to. And so there are laws and regulations governing what you can and cannot do. And I wanted to discuss mortgage fraud today because I say, are you a party to someone else's crime and don't even know it? And so I think that as realtors, we tend to over assist and overshare just from a place of wanting to genuinely help people. Whenever I ask why people got into real estate, no one ever leads with, I wanted to make $1 million. They always say, I want to help people buy a home. It's always around that. And so I think that as relationships build, lines get blurred in terms of what role we play in that relationship. And I think similarly, so do our clients. And so I think that, things can tend to get overly familiar in the relationship, and people say stuff and people do stuff that they may not realize is or is going to lead to a federal crime. So I'm here today to kind of go over some of those things in case you are in that situation. Okay, so before we get into that, I wanted to say a word about what kind of income is considered when an underwriter decides to fund a loan. So as part of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or ECOA, when evaluating a potential borrower's gross income, so that's typically the monthly gross before anything is taken out, a creditor may consider the amount and probability of any income continuing. And that is kind of the foundation of how that piece works. If they are getting income today that they can point to, then the underwriter's decision is how likely is that to continue. So a creditor may not refuse to consider public assistance income the same way as other income. So a lender cannot discriminate on basis of the source of someone's income. So in this example, it's public assistance. It could be unemployment. It could be anything other than a paycheck. A creditor may not discount income because of sex or marital status. So that's pretty known. Discount or refuse to consider income because it comes from part-time employment or pension, annuity, or retirement benefits program. They also may not refuse to consider regular alimony, child support, or separate maintenance payments. Okay, so while this act clearly indicates a lender must consider reliable alimony, child support, or separate maintenance payments as income, the applicant does not, they're not required to disclose that. So these extra sources of income may or may not need to be disclosed, okay, FYI. But my point here is that as we go about that early dance, I'll call it, of qualifying a customer, and we've always been told, make sure they're pre-qualified, make sure they're pre-qualified. And if you start to hear things about, I get a disability check, or I get a pension, or I am on welfare, or any of those other public assistance programs, do not automatically think that they're eliminated from getting a loan. Okay, it is against the law to discriminate against those sources of income. Okay, so talk about mortgage fraud a little bit. So there are kind of two types. So there's negligence, which is an unintentional breach of legal duty, and the loan officer can be sued as a basis of that, but it is unintentional. All right, fraud is the intentional or negligent misrepresentation or concealment of material facts, which can include, now listen closely, failing to disclose required information, actively concealing information, and making false or misleading statements, okay, on the mortgage application. Now I'm mentioning this because I'm sure that some of you have probably had these kinds of conversations with other clients where they tell you something, it's in confidence, or they tell you that they're not going to disclose something to the loan officer because they want to get the house. And we'll talk about more about that specifically in a second. But these are conversations you will have likely had. So so actual fraud is an intentional misrepresentation or concealment of material fact. Constructive fraud is negligent misrepresentation or concealment of material fact. So it basically falls into two categories in terms of the motivation. So we are only talking about you representing the buyer, okay, because they're going to be the borrower. And typically, mortgage fraud is a fraud for profit, which typically involves industry insiders, not the borrower, such as the lender, the appraiser, the real estate agent, and such. The more common one in our world is fraud for the property. So lying or doing something untoward so that they can get the property. So common ways in which fraud may be committed include material representation, such as altered paychecks, stubs, and tax returns. So someone that is mentally preparing for a home purchase should kind of automatically know that they're going to be asked for certain documents to get the loan. If your client is stalling or they can't really ever seem to locate the papers, then that may be a red flag. Okay. They also might include material statements such as stating an intent to occupy a home as a primary residence when the borrower really intends to use it as a rental. Common. Omission, such as failing to mention the borrower is taking an early retirement in 6 weeks. Okay, so that may or may not impact the loan, but it is a material fact in that in 6 weeks, their income currently stated is going to go away. Okay. So let's talk about fraud for the property, as I mentioned. So when a borrower commits mortgage fraud, it's typically to obtain ownership to a property under false or fictitious pretenses. For example, a borrower may make the statement that he will occupy the property as his primary residence when he actually intends to acquire the property and use it as a rental. Or a borrower may knowingly supply false documents such as verifications of employment, forged W-2s, or false information on the loan application, thereby committing mortgage fraud. Okay, so because I know that we work with a lot of investor clients, they might have the best intentions, but they may not realize that what they're doing can lead to a federal crime. Okay, this is especially important if it's an FHA loan, right? Okay, so the next concept talks about what they call a straw buyer. A borrower might also act as a straw buyer, which is someone who allows his name and personal details to be used to obtain a mortgage loan for a property he has no intention of occupying. Sometimes straw buyers are paid for their participation in the scheme, and other times straw buyers have no idea that their personal information was used. Now, that is not to say that a co-signer cannot be a part of a loan. Co-signer is someone that doesn't occupy the property, but is going to take part financial responsibility for the loan. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about blatant misrepresentation, forgery. Okay, borrowers can always also get involved in credit enhancement schemes to show the necessary assets or credit to qualify for a loan. Borrowers may look for fraudulent ways to enhance their financial situation. For example, they may add their names to bank accounts of friends or family to show that they have sufficient assets on deposit. Another scheme is where friends and family, or even builders or loan officers, temporarily park assets into a borrower's account until the underwriter qualifies the borrower and the loan closes. So again, all these things take time. And so we all know that there's a very logical process to applying for and qualifying for a loan. Some of these things might be going on in the background if there are delays. Okay, so one thing I wanted to just kind of revisit, which is investor-related relationships, where again, they may say that it's going to be their primary residence, but then really that's not their intention at all. They want to have it as a rental or flip it. And so if it's an FHA loan, and remember that's attractive because you only have to put 3.5% down. So a lot of investors go after those loans thinking that it's going to be a big payoff, only to find out something like this is the requirement. So the FHA requires sellers to own a property for at least 3 months prior to a new sale involving an FHA insured financing. For resales ranging from that 91 to 180 days, the FHA imposes additional requirements to decrease the possibility of illegal flipping, and they include, they will not insure any resale properties unless the owner of record is the seller. And there's also a second appraisal that is done as well. Okay. Now, if someone, so let's say you did not know about this, an FHA loan requires, because they're assuming it's going to be your primary residence, move in the next 60 days. Okay. So that not only is relevant to today's topic, but when you talk about today's market and the inability of the current owner to be able to move out, leasebacks start getting discussed. And so if you represent the buyer and they have an FHA loan, they got to move in there in the next 60 days. I've seen instances where just out of generosity, the buyer is not in any hurry to move in. They say, yeah, you can stay in there 90 days, stay as long as you want. Well, you can't do that for this exact reason. Okay. So let's talk about something that I've mentioned before in many different scenarios, typically one-on-one, and that is, what can an outside third party contribute to a to a transaction? And so related parties involved. So this happens frequently. You know, house is not on the market, might be your next door neighbor. Mom wants to sell the home to the daughter. And so it says, certainly there is no law against a mother selling her property to her son or daughter, even at a discounted price. However, mortgage fraud scams often involve family members. So when the transaction is not at arm's length, full disclosure is imperative. Cases of mortgage fraud involving entire families have been reported. Many times the straw buyer in a scam is a family member. Purchase contracts between family members should specifically state their relationship so it does not appear intentionally hidden. So what they're talking about here is that a family gets together, decides to sell the home at a discount to a relative turns around and sells it for fair market value or above fair market value. Okay, that's one example. The next is funds paid to undisclosed third parties. In certain mortgage fraud schemes, unknown third parties who appear to have no relation to the transaction are paid out of funds received at the closing. The implication, of course, is there may be debt not revealed in the closing statement. Once again, a closing statement that is not followed to the letter is a red flag to the borrower. It may be prudent to have legal representation to review all the closing paperwork before signing any documents. Okay, so this just further reinforces what I've always said, which is every penny has to be accounted for on that closing disclosure. There is no writing checks to somebody because of some outside wink, wink, handshake agreement. You just cannot do that. So, which leads me to the next point, cash paid to seller outside of escrow. Okay, so this means money paid to the seller that's not on the settlement statement. Seller receives cash from the sale of the property. However, it is not stated in the closing disclosure or in the purchase contract. The motive, of course, is unstated profits. No paper trail exists to show the payment. Okay, cash paid to borrower. Borrower receives cash when purchasing the property. Usually in these cases, the borrower does not have a down payment and the purchase contract calls for the seller to pay all loan costs. Although seller paid costs are becoming more typical in today's economy, schemes in which the borrower receives money from the transactions are not. So Again, in our desire to help our clients, we sometimes make financial concessions. And the point here is that nothing can be omitted from that final closing disclosure. Okay, and if the borrower is right in that gray area where your money will mean getting the home or not getting the home, it becomes even more important to follow the letter of the law. Okay, so similarly, other industry insiders, as I mentioned earlier, that might be colluding to create mortgage frauds, or attorneys, accountants, title companies. And so let's jump down to real estate agents, may assist in the preparation of false documentation, such as sales contracts or property inspections. So these are all things we have access to. Don't do anything illegal. And in finding straw buyers for a property, real estate brokers and agents collude in flipping schemes by finding borrowers for scams and by raising listing prices of homes to make an overinflated appraisal value appear valid. Unscrupulous real estate agents may also steer borrowers to a specific lender in exchange for kickbacks or other consideration. That breaks all sorts of rules. And so just FYI, beware, stick to the letter of the law. So lastly, as I started out by saying, your clients may unknowingly be heading down a road that they shouldn't be heading down. And I think that the number one reason they do this is they're embarrassed, or they have shame about something in their financial past that is going to somehow be revealed, and they feel vulnerable, right? So a bankruptcy, a divorce, they owe $50,000 on their credit card debt. I mean, lots of these things that they honestly think that they can conceal, they can't, and that gets revealed. And so they think it's better to just kind of hide it and hope it goes away, hope no one brings it up and it's not considered. So I can tell you that applying for a loan, unless there are exceptions, as I've mentioned earlier, with regards to what income is counted, everything is counted. Okay, think of it this way: whatever you as an American citizen submit to the IRS is what gets considered. Okay, so there is no hiding. And so whatever skeletons this person has in their closet financially are going to be revealed. I'm just saying that naturally people have a hard time with that. So what do you do with all this? So, it's certainly not your position to, bring this to the attention of the loan officer. But certainly if you are clearly working with a client that is asking you to do something blatantly illegal, like falsifying documents or hold this contract back until XYZ happens, you got to come see me, and we'll decide based on the situation what to do. Even in the loan officer's world, even they're not necessarily to jump the gun and assume that what they're doing is intentional. There are steps they take to verify and make sure that it's really, it's not just an honest mistake. So, but beware clearly that you may be in conversations that involve these kinds of things going on. So if you are at all worried, please reach out and let's talk it over. Best red flag to me is if they can't produce the documents, if they're stalling the lender, because people love to procrastinate. But if you're about to go buy a home and the market conditions today, you're going to have those documents ready, right? So just be wary of what your clients may or may not be telling you. So that was it for the presentation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or life experiences they want to share?
So hi, Brad, this is Arshia. So I have a question for you that whenever I put an offer for my clients, and I always try to give them a comparative market analysis. So, as you know, in the market, there are multiple offers and the houses are going over asking price. So like most of the time, like people ask, like, what is your suggestion? What offer should we put? So as an agent, are we like by law, like not permitted, but like not to permit what number we can tell them? So that was one thing, like I usually tell them that, this is not my um, area to tell like what should be the offer. And this is for you to decide after looking at the comps. So I just wanted your feedback.
Yes. Yeah.
on
So a couple of things going on there, because to your point, you could do comps, but based on what's going on in the marketplace, they may or may not be relevant. So that's one point. But let's face it, both you and your client have the same set of data. And so now they're looking to you to interpret that data. And if they're asking you what your opinion is, I'd give it to them. Only because tactically there are some things that you can suggest they do to win the offer. Where the issue comes in is if you phrase it in a way that suggests if they don't do that, they're not going to get the offer. So if you say things like, well, you've got to offer 25% above asking, or you're never going to get this offer, or you have to pay for the title policy, you have to sign an appraisal waiver. No, they don't. But if after several other offers that haven't gone through, and there are some things that they're doing that could be done differently, absolutely offer that. I mean, offer that advice. And even if you come up with a number, I mean, you always want to say, do you feel comfortable with that? And you could say things like, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly what number is going to be the right number. There are lots of variables that go into winning an offer. And even if you did everything right, there's no guarantee. But there are metrics that, can tell you with the comps and such, what the general area is getting over and above asking price. So I wouldn't hesitate to provide your opinion.
So in case if it's not going to appraise on that, then like as an agent, we are kind of not going to be blamed like that, because you asked us to put at this point and now it's not being appraised. So as an agent, we are kind of not at that point that they could come back to us and say that, this is the number that you gave and it's not appraised. So that was like my next question for you.
No, I mean, I think that in that same conversation, you're going to talk about the risk of it not appraising. And so I would have all those points kind of outlined in that same conversation.
Okay. And one more thing, like most of the time, like they want to discuss like what the lender, like the rates they have given, and they would like to ask like, what is your suggestion to like how many points we should do, 0 or 1, or should we do a 15-year or 20-year? So can we as an agent tell them that, this is not my side of the transaction and I'm not able to speak on it, or we do need to guide them on that as well on the lender side?
No, I would not. I would absolutely not do that. I mean, each person's financial situation is unique to them. So I would let them discuss that with their lender.
Okay. And one more thing, that's usually what buyers are coming, as you're saying that, as you are an agent, so people come to you and they ask you that, we have seen that the national trends are showing that the house prices will have to come down to make it affordable. So at that point, I usually go about and say that, like, honestly, no one has that crystal ball that can tell you that the house prices are going to come down. So like at that point, how should the conversation go? Because obviously, like, as an agent, like it's kind of hard to give a concrete answer to that.
Yeah, I think what you said is perfect. I think that unfortunately human nature is everyone's looking for a catastrophe, and people that lived through 07, 08 think that it's going to be Groundhog Day all over again. I mean, if you don't know, and no one knows, but I mean, for that reason, I would be hesitant to give any kind of concrete advice. I mean, if you want to provide opinions, great. Observations, great. But, you know, like you said, no one knows for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff. Anybody else? All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks for hanging on, and we will be back here next Thursday at 1. And you guys have a great rest of the week and enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you then.